Weak, said Locke. We are iron. We do not fail, and we do not fear disappointment. Kargathar knew his war brother well. Angering the despoiler was not a notion Torvan Locke would care about. He was too far along his own path now. Perhaps if my fleet could have the direct support of the parasite, said Claudrin. If we were to make a concerted attack together, we could overwhelm the port void shields. Parasite is armored enough to take the brunt of their defense fire for the few minutes it would require.
Dismissal,
blurted High Magos Zyrax in alarm.
Parasite will maintain current position and operational parameters. Imperial force arrival imminent.
You will not help us, and yet we are considered to be failing and you are not? Asked Util angrily.
Parasite's Vox and augury monitoring is enhancing ground force efficacy by projected factor of 3,
retorted the High Magos.
Concurrent decrease in coordination of enemy forces due to risk of detection through Vox or energistic signature at projected factor of 3 also. Detection of incoming assets at 100% probability, while Parasite remains in mid-lunar orbit.
Apart from those you have already failed to detect, said Fodov acidly.
My lords,
said Tenebris with a laugh in his voice.
You must rely on your own talents. Both the word-bearers and the Magi of the Mechanicum have their own duties to attend to. Those are progressing according to schedule, are they not?
They are. The Macro-Cathedrum is reconsecrated, and our labours in the catacombs are all but done, said Kargathar. We have the favour of the Four.
Confirmatory. Psychoreactive cabling and data shrine installation currently at 72% completion, blared Zyrax. 5 of 8 Noctilith focusing arrays are online. Consecrated servitor maniples continue the work. Advisory. Current labor pace will eliminate 81% of available unaugmented labor force by completion.
Perhaps you could accelerate matters, High Magos, said Tenebris. It didn't sound like a command, but neither was it a suggestion.
Facilitating,
replied Zyrax, his mechanical voice emotionless.
Completion projected in 15 hours' time.
Very good, then, said Tenebris, and Kargathar could imagine him clapping his worm-fingered hands together.
If there is nothing else.
No voice spoke in reply.
Excellent,
said Tenebris.
Let us be about our divine work, the better to ensure the War Master's pleasure. Yes?
Tenebris's voice was light and friendly again. The darkness whirled around Kargathar before anyone else had a chance to speak. He found himself on his hands and knees beside the font, retching sulphurous black ooze that drooled straight through his helm's vox reel as if it was something not wholly material. He looked up to see Tenebris standing untroubled.
Yang,
Tenebris said condescendingly,
see to your master. I believe something ails him.
Tenebris tutted at Kargathar.
All that power, too.
The sorcerer departed the chamber in a whisper of robes, leaving Kargathar seething. Chapter 24. Arrival. War Brother. Korax. The Thunderhawks coasted without power towards Cathalamor for a day, their systems at minimal output and flight shielded by the debris of the campaign's opening void battles. Only when they needed to make the rapid dash down through the atmosphere did their engines ignite. As soon as news was given of the final approach, Akalor and Vikalan hastened to the landing pads assigned to the Adeptus Astartes. They crossed raised causeways over the fields that filled much of the space between the landing mounds. The larger facilities had been the arrival points for Cathalamor's legions of pilgrims. The galleons had fled when the invasion began, but some of the hangars still held their abandoned landing vessels, covered now in blankets of dust. Seeing these prompted Vikalan to speak.
I must say something, Shield Captain.
Then speak, my brother. I listen attentively to all words said in good faith.
It is faith I speak of, Marcus, he said.
How so, Hastius?
I will say bluntly, said Vikalan, I do not like it when you feed the superstition of our people.
I see, said Akalor. You disagree with the use of religious language when dealing with our allies here.
Heretics, Faith, the Emperor is watching. It's nonsense, Vikeland said. You know it's nonsense. You have seen the Emperor. You know he is a man. Why do you insist on using their false terms?
Because they understand the world that way, said Akalor. The Adeptus Ministorum is the second most powerful organization in the Imperium. The faith of the people is our most potent weapon in this war.
Yet it is false, said Vikeland.
Is it false, Hastius? Said Akalor. Is it false when the sisters pray and their belief in our master protects them? Is it false that the soldiers here draw on wells of courage that would run dry without belief in the Emperor's protection? Is it false when the cards of the tarot deliver the Emperor's will to his servants? Vikeland stopped and put a hand on Akalor's arm.
The Emperor is powerful. I have no doubt that he reaches out and touches those who will further his goals, just as he guides us. By the throne, Marcus, there are whispers that he stirs, and more hear his words. That is a wondrous thing, if true. But he is not a god, and when you use these words that impute divinity to him so easily, it troubles me.
Akalor stared at his friend a long time. The sound of distant battle rolled across the blasted city. I sometimes wonder if you are truly fitted for the emissaries imperatus, Hastius. Vikeland held his position, then laughed in rue and turned aside.
Someone has to break heads when diplomacy fails.
You are an impatient man, said Akalor.
And you love me for it, my brother.
It is not for your impatience that I value you, said Akalor. Do not be concerned. I judge the moral weight of my words as much as I do their effect. They are chosen carefully.
Do others see it that way? Said Vikeland.
They recommenced walking. Hastius, for thousands of years the entente between the Church and the State has held. It is useful. Nay, it is necessary. We should not burn the Imperium upon the bonfire of our principles. Take heart from this, that the Primarch also finds worship distasteful. He is a son of the old truths. Perhaps he can make sense prevail again. They were approaching the landing pads, prepared for the arrival of Brother Lucerne and his men. Teams of human ground crew with servitor support stood ready, in case the ship should land aflame or with injured aboard. They are coming, said Akalor. Hurry now. They quickened their stride. As they reached the pads, there was movement to the north, where the hills rose highest. The first defense laser ground slowly into action, followed by several others, the great orbs of their ball turrets, huge as basilica domes, aligning. Once in position, they began to fire in sequence, the flash heating of the atmosphere by their beams sending whip-cracked thunders across the city. The ground rumbled with the activity of reactors far beneath their feet. "They are there!" a human port officer shouted, looking up from a pad-side cogitator and pointing skywards. 3 brilliant dots appeared above. Akalor and Vikeland watched the ruby strobing of defense lasers as the Thunderhawks came in. The enemy were quick to respond. Alarms wailed from every quarter of the void port as enemy aircraft raced to intercept the gunships. The net of defense lasers was ill-suited to bringing down such small vessels, but Icarus las cannons joined their bigger brethren, and their delicate fire grid kept out the demon engines and pursuit craft that would dare the skies over Ascension Stair. With a crackling ripple, a ceiling of flak bursts filled the middle airs with shrapnel. Higher up was where the danger lay. Las cannon beams were made ineffective by atmospheric diffraction, and the solid munitions did not have the energy to soar so high. For crucial minutes after they first hit the atmosphere, the Thunderhawks were vulnerable. Akalor's helm displays gave him a real-time graphical view of the ship's progress, and he saw their ident runes dart and spin around interceptors rendered as fanged skulls. The Space Marine pilots fired on their pursuers, and several of the ships disintegrated, for though the pursuers were faster than the gunships, the Thunderhawks were heavily armed. Vikeland gave a sharp intake of breath as one Thunderhawk was set upon by half a dozen fighters, slowly divided from the flight and forced into a corkscrewing dive. Though it made good account of itself, it was riddled by shells, and came apart in an explosion visible as a yellow blotch in the sky. The other 2 Thunderhawks came into the safety of the anti-aircraft net, whereupon their attackers were driven off, and they hurtled down towards the landing pads with their bright yellow hulls scorched and steaming from the rigours of re-entry. They fired their thrusters at the last possible moment, coming to a hover when it seemed certain they would crash. Heat buffeted the welcoming party. Landing struts extending, they drifted a little with minor course correction until steel touched steel and they settled into their hydraulics. Engines spooled down from an excited scream, leaving the sky to the shrieks of the departing enemy and the last few explosions of flak. Hulls pinked as they cooled. Then all the hatches and ramps opened onto an interior soaked in ruddy lumen glow. Lucerne emerged first, daylight changing his armor from sanguine red to the rich yellow of Rogel Dawn's livery. Mistress Astropath Ashmaeln followed, flanked by 2 more of the unnumbered sons. Then the rest debarked in ranks of 2, split as they came out, and filed out to ring the main landing pad. The mortals gaped to see the angels of death come among them, more even than they had at the Adeptus Custodes, for there were 20 of the Space Marines, and their legends were better known.
Sergeant Lucerne,
Akalor greeted the Space Marine.
10 lost on the way down, along with 1 Thunderhawk,
Lucerne said. He looked over the city.
Acceptable fatalities for insertion into a war zone like this. The Emperor is with us. Come,
Akalor said.
That's it. You drop me into this nightmare with a 1 in 3 chance of death, and I get no greeting, said Ashmaeln. She was pale-faced and trembling.
Apologies, Mistress Astropath, said Akalor. The hour is late, and politesse eludes me, for we must soon go to war.
Yes, you don't have much time, said Ashmaeln. She pulled a scroll case from her robes and held it out to Akalor. Message from the shipmistress. I'll give you the short version. The fleet's coming early. You'd better move faster.
Now, said Vikalan. That's days ahead of schedule.
They will be here in 2 days at the outside. She pointed over the horizon in the direction of Asclepiadus's macro-cathedrum. You should be heading there, custodian, she said.
We shall, said Akalor. But why do you say that?
Because the empiric interference that's giving me the worst headache I've ever had and stopping every teleprayer from leaving this system emanates from there, my lord. And if you had the Emperor's sight, as I do, you would see upon the horizon a tower of unnatural colour and the faces that scream within it. If there is any threat to the Primarch and the Crusade, I'd wager my second sight it is to be found there. That's why.
Aye. Well, said Vikalan, we've other business to be attending to first.
You are being serious, I take it, Lord Vikalan, said Ashmaeln. The danger is in the cathedrum.
As serious as the Emperor himself, said Akalor. To win a war, one must fight more than one battle. Locke drowsed in his tank. Night was heavy over him, full of smoke and bursts of light. The sound of Fodov's guns rocked the city, and the flash of the void shields resisting the shelling sent nightmares crawling across the sky. Cradled in Draco Kravgi's warm embrace, Locke's present receded, and he remembered another day and another world, a war of a different age. Istvan 5. Bolt guns flashed over black sand. Locke's company roared after the fleeing Raven Guard. Corax's sons rode swift combat bikes, but for all their skill at evasion, they could not resist the guns of the Iron Warriors' tanks. Lasfire lit up the night. Heavy bolter rounds cut fiery tracks over the black. He remembered with a Space Marine's perfect clarity every kill. The bikes hit and flipped into the air. The bodies blasted to pieces. They fled, the sons of Corax, but they were doomed.
Finish them,
Captain Keith commanded. His voice came to Locke as if he heard it again, right then, 9,000 years later. He had a singer's voice, Keith. He and Locke had been friends once.
Finish them!
Locke, a driver then, accelerated. The sons of Corax split and split again, weaving complex patterns as they accelerated away. But the Iron Warriors were too many, their bloodlust too great. The end was in sight. And then it was not. One of the Predator tanks lifted up to Locke's front as something large hit it. Locke had the impression of sparks and claws and blue-hot jets, spread wings and a vengeful white face, and then his own vehicle stopped, rammed hard into the back of the stricken tank.
Corax! Corax is here!
One of the others voxed. He could see him. Corax was not 2 yards away, feet planted on either track guard of the stricken Predator. Its tracks churned up black sand, and it shifted, but Locke's tank was tangled with it, and the two were locked in place. Locke's commander shouted from the turret, urging him to pull back. The tanks slewed about, threatening to toss the Primarch from the roof, But he stood firm, face straining as he heaved at the Predator's domed turret, power claws carving through plasteel. He stood up suddenly with a roar Locke felt in his bones and flipped the turret clean off. Lightning burst from ruptured power lines. Corax thrust his arm into the exposed cupola and tore out the tank commander there, skewering him on his claws and hurling him away into the dark. Some of the tanks in Locke's group had roared on after the fleeing Raven Guard. Others fled before the anger of the 19th Primarch, yet some could not resist the prize of this most mighty of kills, and they circled the stricken tanks, firing at the giant atop them. Autocannon shells ricocheted from his armor. Las cannon beams scorched the air around him, but Corax stood indestructible in their fury. Then he turned his attention to Locke. "Move!" Locke's commander said. Long dead now, his name was Azorius of the Pentateuch. "Move!" Rarely had Locke heard an Iron Warrior panic. He rammed the drive sticks back. The tank fishtailed, its ram stuck firm in the dead Predator's rear door. Corax jumped onto the glacis, driving the machine down with his weight. Locke thought that had saved them, because the ram point dislodged, though it did not seem so when a sable fist punched forward, claws alive with disruption lightning, and burst through the tank's front. Locke barely stopped the engine from stalling as the tank suddenly lurched backwards. Corax clung to the front one-handed, the claws inches from the mask of Locke's helm, and with the other he swept back and forth, ripping at the glacis, carving up furrows in the ceramite. Cables sputtered. Smoke filled the cabin. Locke swung the tank from side to side, but Corax would not be moved, his enraged god's face becoming more visible with each swipe of his claw. Azorius spun the turret round. Power cells hummed as the twin las powered to fire, but Corax swung his fist and cleaved the barrels. A flash of power burst behind Locke, and Azorius shouted. Fires caught in the cabling. Alarms trilled all around him. The Predator accelerated to full reverse speed, Locke driving blind, but still Corax would not let go. He drew back his fist again. Black eyes flashed in a corpse-pale face. The fist flew forward, obliterating the rags of metal left between the Primarch and the future warpsmith. It continued on, severing controls and into Locke's armor, whereafter the tip of one claw found and blew his primary heart. The tank rolled to a halt. Fire was blazing all through the rear compartment. Hatches slammed as Azorius and the secondary gunner tried to escape. Locke tried to breathe, his secondary heart still not yet fully engaged, his lungs filling with blood, his body close to failure from the shock. Corax could have finished him then. Every night, for thousands of years, Locke had wondered why he had not. Locke gaped. Blood flowed from his mouth and pooled in his helm. He was closer to death then than he had ever been, and he remembered well the look on the Primarch's face, the look of horror and of betrayal. Then Corax was gone, a flash of armor and wings, and night took Locke. A soft rap on the side of the tank brought Locke back to himself.
War brother, it is I.
Kargatha, Locke said. He shifted himself. His bones hurt with a fever's cold.
Come out, my brother. Let us speak.
Locke was in no mood for conversation, yet something made him get up.
A moment,
he grunted. He yanked at his interface cables. A machine bleeped, as if in pain. He pulled again, and felt the spikes break in the sockets in his armor, obliging him to fish out the spines. What he cast out onto the deck was made of gristle. He made his way out of Dracocravki and found Kargatha waiting, helmless and solemn, a few yards behind the tank. Locke stopped when he saw his friend.
You are changed,
he said.
You will be too soon, my war brother,
said Kargatha. Locke limped towards the Dark Apostle. He had not changed physically, yet seemed larger somehow. Once this would have alarmed Locke, but he had seen far stranger things in the long war.
Then, Locke said, you have your wish. My wish has only ever been to serve the gods, said Kargatha.
You have done that well, said Locke. He limped past his friend and went to a stowage bin on the back of Dracocravki. It was a simple metal box, surprising by its quotidian nature when one considered what lived within the tank. From inside, Locke took out a glass bottle protected in a net of twisted cord. Drink, he said. Speaking was becoming more difficult for him. Kargathar nodded. Locke thrust the bottle at him and took off his own helm. It was so hard to remove now. The joints kept sealing over, like fresh skin, and the shape of his face made disentangling himself from it awkward. He took the top off, then removed the distorted mask, tossing both onto the top of his tank. Kargathar had not seen his war brother's true visage in some years, and now he looked in wonder upon the blessings the dark gods had bestowed. Locke stood in discomfort as he looked him over, the bestial lines, his jaw heavy and distorted by the suggestion of tusks, the vestigial horns which jutted from his temples. Below them, Locke's eyes were amber, his pupils black slits. There was murder in those eyes.
"Such fine acolytes we are. Both blessed," said Kargathar.
Locke's twisted mouth smiled.
"You, perhaps. I bear their blessings with discomfort." "It is a test, brother," said Kargathar. "Pass it, and no real reward."
"Like you."
"Not like me," said Kargathar. "Better."
Locke retrieved the bottle and uncorked it. He handed it back to his friend. Kargathar drank, pulling a face.
"What is this?" "No weakling's wine," said Locke, with a real smile now. "Olympian Slozo, or at least an approximation of it." He took back the bottle and drank long, finishing with a gasp. "Burns like I remember."
"It tastes like engine lubricant."
"That may be one ingredient," Locke admitted.
"It is good to see you. To what do I owe this visit?"
"Comradeship,"
said Kargathar softly. Locke looked again at his friend, knowing immediately why Kargathar had come.
"You have come to say farewell. You think you are going to die."
"We all die, war brother."
"Don't give me your priest riddles,"
Locke said angrily. The rush of emotion surprised him.
"When? When did you know?"
"The power I hold within me will consume me."
"Then why take it?" said Locke. "Why now?"
"The weapon. Tenebris. The war. The Adeptus Custodes are here. They will not be bested by mortal means."
"So, there's nothing but war," said Locke.
"What makes this one so special you must surrender your life to it?"
"Faith,"
said Kargathar, without hesitation.
"Matters here must go according to the will of the gods. The War Master, Abaddon—"
"Ah, Abaddon, another vainglorious fool," said Locke. "He's the same as Horus, a liar who has deceived himself."
"Maybe,"
said Kargathar, "but he will triumph. Victory must be won correctly. It must be done with faith. Abaddon does not honor the gods, not as he should, not yet."
"Nor does my Primarch,"
said Locke. "Would you have an eternity of rule by the Lord of Iron?"
"I would have no eternity under anyone,"
said Locke. "Then why do you go on?" said Kargathar.
"I don't know,"
said Locke. He stopped the bottle and put it away, his thirst forgotten. "Mankind was made to worship. That is Lorgar's creed. If Abaddon takes the throne of terror, insisting on his own supremacy, the gods will destroy him, and mankind will endure a living hell."
"Mankind already endures a living hell, Kargathar," said Locke. "Do not pretend any of us are in this for anything but ourselves. If you taught me one thing, it's that chaos has no mercy. We have been lied to by everyone. All we can do is fight. That is all there is."
"It is not true. Lorgar had a vision," said Kargathar. "Mankind living in harmony with the gods, as supplicants and willing vessels for their power. All the potential the Emperor sought to deny us and keep for himself. When you speak as you do, Torvan, you outline the Emperor's path, not mine. You have known their gifts. You have lived 9 millennia. You have seen things of such sublime glory. Could the boy you were have imagined such a thing? We all have that potential. If the strong are allowed to prosper, humanity will rise to glory. But the gods are fickle, and they must be propitiated. It is the duty of my legion to make Abaddon see this. It is our duty to make the victory the right one." Locke laughed.
"You're all deluded. There is nothing but death and suffering. So it has ever been, so it will ever be. You can't control Abaddon. You can't control what manner of victory he will have. You can't reason with the gods. What is this that we fight for? We were dupes under the Emperor's banner, under Horus's, and still under Abaddon's, while the gods laugh all the while.
Yet the gods honor you, Kargathar said, stepping forward. And yet you still dedicate your kills to them. Why, if you are so full of doubt?
Because there is nothing else, said Locke quietly.
He looked around his camp. His men sat by fires, their machines silent, hidden by the walls of a roofless building. It could have been any night in his miserably long life. Kargathar broke the silence.
I have new gifts, new insights. I can help you one last time, war brother, to find the glory I know you still seek.
Locke glanced back at him.
Truly, you know it.
Locke paused a moment, staring out into the night, then turned to his friend.
We know the enemy will move against us. We are prepared. They will not wait for their relief force. It is in the nature of them to push forward when inspired. The Emperor's own muling chaperones are here. Their arrival will have lit a fire of righteousness under the weaklings. They will be eager to die on our swords to show their faith.
They will, agreed Kargathar.
They will move over the bridge, seeking to strike at us before we do the same. I've tried to tell Tenebris this, but he will not listen. He is concerned with higher matters, but I will always heed you, said Kargathar.
Locke nodded.
I've examined the ground. I expect several attacks. They may make an advance towards the cathedral, but I expect they will try to retake the Blessed Bastion first. I've sent warriors to reinforce it, but I personally plan to ambush them. If you are willing to help, I want you to draw on your favor and shroud me. I will set my trap in the Commercia nearby. If they go for either target, some of them will go that way. I wish to conceal myself so completely they will not notice I am there until it is too late. A shroud, a shadow. You know these things. Hide me.
Locke expected to make his case, to argue even, and he dearly wished not to, for he'd had his fill of conflict. But Kargathar surprised him.
I shall lend your cabal the necessary art. I shall contact Osmok, if you haven't had him killed yet. The worm still leads my sorcerers. Then consider it done, war brother.
Locke smiled sadly.
I remember when you first called me that. Before you came, I was thinking of the night you saved me. Do you remember it?
I do, said Kargathar.
That night you pulled my body from that wrecked tank. My brothers slaughtered all around me. I thought I was going to die. I knew you were not, though it took me hours to find you.
Yes, said Locke.
You have told me 1,000 times you went there because the gods sent you.
Locke looked up into his friend's eyes. They were a solid black now, like those of the Lord of Ravens. There was no escaping what they were. The Space Marines, the Primarchs, the powers of the warp, he thought. They were all parts of the same cosmic jest.
Is that really true? The evidence speaks for itself, said Kargathar. You live. No, brother, I mean it. Did the gods really send you?
Kargathar paused. Then he said softly,
They aided me, but only because I asked them to.
They held each other's eyes a long time, until Locke broke the silence with a small laugh.
There is a Primarch coming here. Can you imagine it? After so long. It has been ordained. This is the last war.
The smile faded from Locke's deformed lips.
You can never understand how much I pray that is true, brother, Locke said.
He looked away again.
This power you have taken. I know you, Kargathar. You seek to face things you should not. You will fight the Corpse Lord's lackeys. You should leave. Let us fight again on other worlds. It is my fate, said Kargathar. My story ends here. But do not mourn me, for I go on to greater glory. Hold true to the faith I have given you, Torvan Locke, and you will know power untold of.
Another possibility?
A certainty. Kargathar embraced his friend. Fight well, Torvan. This shall be our last meeting. In honor of our friendship, you shall have your Shroud of Shadow.
Chapter 25. A Miraculous Fissure. St. Klaitos Span. A Need to be Seen. Akalor and his custodians waited in a cloister overlooking the Canyon of Countless Blessings. The early evening light slanted between the ragged spire tops, painting the ruins of the other side of the bridge with shifting patches of black and red.